Thanks everybody for being with me today. And I just want to thank all of those people who have subscribed to my channel in the last 4 days. It's been extremely humbling to have so many of you not only subscribe, but also comment in the comment section in such positive ways. Because in the past, I guess, when I'm talking about the past, I'm talking about the last 12 months, maybe 2 years since I've been doing this, that I don't often get really positive comments. In fact, I would suggest that 80% of the comments that I have received in the past have been extremely negative. Primarily those comments that I've made in relation to Donald Trump. So it's pleasing, if not encouraging, to receive comments that are supporting the work that I'm doing. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to agree with me either, but what it does mean is that I appreciate your responses and particularly your subscriptions. So thanks very much for that. Now, today though, I'm going to talk about something that is Trumpian. So this may upset some people, but it is my right to be able to say some of these things. And this is about the impact that Trump supposedly may have had on the election and Australian election. And I'm somewhat dubious as to the degree to which Trumpism has played a part. There is evidence, or survey at least, to suggest that 27% of Australians would support a Trumpist approach to politics, but the rest would say, well, quite frankly, bugger off. We don't want you to be as part of the Australian political scene. So what this actually means is that there has been obviously very little response that would enable or facilitate a Liberal Party, the Nationals or anybody else to increase their vote. In fact, standing as of today, the ALP have 92 seats, the NLP 39, Independents 8 and others have 2. So, and I did hear today actually that the Liberal Party haven't gained any seats at all. They've just lost seats in this election. So it was kind of a landslide, I guess. But the question I'm asking is today, and which I'd like some response from you on, is do you think that the Trumpism or the Trump effect or the impact of Trump has had any effect on our political system at all? Now, I believe that Australians see their system, our system, as totally different from anybody else. And I've said this before, not just because we have preferential voting, because we have compulsory voting, and because we have the Australian Electoral Commission, independent body, that manages the votes which are not electronic. They're all paper votes, gets them all counted, done in a reasonable amount of time, all that sort of stuff. There's only 18 million people that do vote anyway, so maybe that's the reason. But nevertheless, it is done. No one questions it. No one says it was stolen. No one disputes the results. No matter how close they are, they get counted appropriately and the winner gets declared. That is just simply the way it is in Australia, and we need to celebrate that because of all the systems that are used democratically to vote for politicians around the world. The Australian system is probably one of the best. And don't ask me to find a survey that suggests that because I've got no bloody idea. But nevertheless, I believe that's the way it is here in Australia. And we need to celebrate this because we are different. We think differently. We're an isolated nation, in fact. For those of you that haven't noticed, we happen to be surrounded by water. We are the largest island continent in the world. We sit in a region which has Muslims above us, we have Buddhists, we have a whole range of different ethnic groups sitting around us, from Papua New Guineans to Indonesians to Vietnamese to Cambodian, Thai people, Indians, South Koreans and so on, and Japan. So we've got, and then there's the Pacific region. in which there are all these Polynesian people too that are certainly part of our sphere of influence in particular. So we're unique. And I think at some point we need to acknowledge that uniqueness and recognise the fact that outside influences probably won't have that much impact on us if we accept and celebrate the uniqueness that is Australia, including one of the major issues that I've been trying to work through for many years is the way we treat First Nations people and dealing with that particular issue as well. So in Australia ourselves, we're not very good at managing the issues that concern us or should concern us the most. That is the way that the experiences that First Nation people have. And over the rest of this year, I'll be talking about that in greater detail as we analyse what the Labor Party are doing in terms of addressing those issues and the issues that were produced as a result of The Voice a couple of years ago. So that's where we are. But there is an influence from outside which does trouble me. And so there's a couple of articles that have been written in the Sydney Morning Herald that I want to discuss here because it celebrates on one hand our uniqueness, which I agree with. And, if you've got any comments about our uniqueness, it'd be fascinating to see what they are. And you might have a completely different perspective to myself. And the other thing too is, that's worth noting is that we're a multicultural nation, probably one of the most significant and diverse nations on this planet. And that needs to be celebrated as well. But in this particular article, in the Sydney Morning Herald, it says, spooked by Trump, Aussies stayed close to home and chose dinky dye elbow. And I think there's an element, so I believed this before I even read this article, and I believe this is the case. Australia has voted for its politics to remain Australian, using its uniquely Australian model of democracy, as I've just discussed with you, to re-elect an emphatically Australian Prime Minister. One way of interpreting the Labor landslide, the Liberal demolition and the Greens dismissal as a rejection of Americanisation and a collective act of Australianisation. And I think this particular point is really significant because here in Australia, we, as I've described, have this unique way of viewing ourselves. And it's really fascinating that at election time is that time where we all get together and we make a decision about who we want to govern us. And somehow in all of that decision-making process, we arrive at a place which tells us who we are, the way we want to be, and how we would like to direct ourselves in the future, where we want to go, in other words. And it's clear that Australian people made that decision at this election because we want to demonstrate to the world our sense of Australianisation. Now, it's worth noting here that one of the issues I have is around AUKUS, that we need to stop relying on the United States. We had a chance to use the French submarines, but Morrison abandoned that for the United States. The reality is we can't trust Trump, therefore we can't trust the United States to help to defend us if need be. Not that we can see any indication of that right now, but we need to make sure that we're self-reliant. We discovered that during COVID, that it was important to make sure that the supply chains were there, that they were linking together so that we could get the goods that we needed at that particular crucial time. And I think we've learned some lessons from that. We've learned from trade that it's about time that we found other people that we could trade with apart from the United States. Very much as China has chosen to do since they've had these tariffs imposed upon them by the US. So the world is changing. We no longer need to rely on America for anything, for even our sense of being and who we are, I used to think that, we used to go out and we used to go buy Nike and we watch American television and, I was just thinking of what television shows I used to watch, Brady Bunch. And then we Uh, and then we discovered ourselves by making our own shows, such as Neighbours and so forth, and a lot of really good shows that we're making now that we can find on streaming services and iView and so on. So we discovered our own sense of self. We decided that we didn't need to have our version of who we are imposed upon us by the United States. Now, we need to make sure that we rip ourselves away from this version of control, which is the US. And the only way we can do that is become totally self-sufficient. So I think part of this election has told us that the Australianisation process has taken place, is taking place, and that we need to make sure that we find ways to separate ourselves even further. So this article goes on to say, let's not be reductionist. Other factors were at play: a self-sabotaging campaign for what used to be one of the world's most efficient electoral winning machines, the paucity of policy formation from Liberal Party bereft of talent and ideas, true, a stance from Peter Dutton on working from home that proved as fissile as his nuclear fixation. Nonetheless, the Trump factor was transformative. I don't necessarily agree too much with that notion. How transformative was it? I think that's open for discussion. It negated anti-incumbency, the most powerful force in global politics in 2024, and a weaker conservative leader who thought the rightward cultural vibe shift at the time of Trump's restoration would carry him to the lodge. And, they talk about here the delay of the election because of Cyclone Alfred and the effects of Typhoon Trump, who were more fully apparent at the time Australia finally went to the polls. The Liberation Day thing, the herd of McDonald's Island, and the tariffing of penguins, all that sort of stuff. The bizarre way by which Trump does bloody everything. Impacted, I guess, the way we didn't want to be like that anymore. It's like when we watched America. We grew up with them. Well, I did. My generation grew up with American movies. We knew more about American history than we knew about our own country because we were inundated with that stuff. And now we're saying, I don't want to know that anymore. I have access to other material that I can watch, other things I can do, other ways I can celebrate my life without necessarily becoming Americanized. So, and I think that's a really important part of where we're heading. So say here, Peter Dutton became the Pierre Poilievre of Australian politics, a conservative leader who could not even hold his seat, to deploy a term that became increasingly voguish during the Howard years. Maybe he suffered, among other things, from being perceived of as un-Australian. And maybe he was. But the thing I also want to talk about is the impact, whether or not this notion around Australians being Americanised, or whether we're redefining ourselves now as un-Australian, Australianisation, whether we're encapsulating that idea in ways which are going to benefit the way we progress into the future. Because there are people like Gina Rinehart and Alex Antic who are proposing the MAGA view of the world. And I find this extremely distressing because there are aspects of our political system which will endeavour to look to Trumpism as being a powerful idea, that populism is important, that populism will gain the votes and the motivation, I guess, that it has in the United States. I challenge that view. I don't think it will. I think anybody that adopts that attitude will actually find themselves buried in the backyard, basically. So there is this other article, again from the Sydney Morning Herald, which says that Gina Rinehart and the senator who wants to make the Liberal Party great again, which is Alex Antic. So it goes on to say, Australia's richest person was, like most of the country, unhappy with the Liberal Party on Saturday night. Well, why wouldn't she? She doesn't get her own way, and she can't control the Labor Party in the same way that she doesn't, but she doesn't control the Labor Party in the same way she controls the Liberal Party, but for different reasons to your average swing voter. Billionaire mining magnate Gina Rinehart lashed the coalition following its electoral drubbing for being insufficiently Trumpian, of all things, accusing left media of frightening the Liberals away from following the lead of the US president. Now, I don't know who that left media is that they're referring to here. It certainly isn't Sky News. They continually celebrate Donald Trump. Love this picture. Trump will fix it. Trump isn't capable of fixing anything, but nevertheless, this is what these morons tend to want to believe. And while moderates bemoaned the perceived ties between Donald Trump and Peter Dutton that helped smash the party at the ballot box, a handful have echoed Rinehart's sentiment. Chief among those was South Australian Senator and anti-woke warrior Alex Antic, who told Sky News this week that it was time to make the Liberal Party great again. Turns out, not only have the pair been singing from the same hymn book on the Liberal Party's future, they've even been hanging out. According to an election eve register of interests disclosed, Antic received dinner and hospitality from Rinehart and her Hancock prospecting. So the point is that there is this element, whether it be Rinehart or whether it be Antic or whether it be Senator Bobart, someone correct me on his name, or whether it be One Nation, there will always be these popularists. And no matter how devastating a loss is, these people will always want to find a way to divide, to develop hatred, fear, resentment. Because for whatever reason, the country in which they live, the country in which they profess they love, is not good enough. And that we have to look overseas like we do for Nike shoes, which is certainly made in China. But we have to look to the marketing that's taking place in another country, as flawed as it is, to come to some realisation that system somehow is better, when in actual fact the system we have, the system we're using right now, is better than any other in the world. We need to acknowledge that, we need to celebrate it, and we need to let people like Gina Rinehart and Alex Antic know that they will not have the power, either financially, as in the case with Rinehart, or politically, as in the case with Antic, to be able to change this system, to discourage us from being Australian. Let me know what you think in the comment sections below, and certainly remember, please, to subscribe to my channel and ring the bell for further notifications. Thanks everybody for being with me. Take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.